Texas Karate Institute and the Texins Karate Club. 1965 and 1985 represented here.
Great privilege. We had GM Royce Young, GM James Toney, GM Timothy Taya,
Chin Sukot Kwan.
Yeah. Grandmaster June Reed, Grandmaster Alan Steen, Grandmaster Pat Burleson.
Nosebleed Cinema. Nosebleed Cinema. You have to know how that feels to understand.
Standing here with a new but old friend and familiar face who came in from LA to watch this bout. Your thoughts about this bout, Dennis' performance tonight?
Well, I thought it was excellent. Again, Boom Boom's a big hitter. You got to understand, this guy was 19-0, but all first or second round knockouts. So obviously, he's a big hitter, and he showed it tonight.
Thank you, Grandmaster.
Yeah, this was the Clash of the Titans back then. Different schools basically trying to achieve the heavyweight championship.
Gene McCombs over there in the corner for Mark Kaiser.
And of course, that's one of the legends, Mark Kaiser, high-ranking black belt that fought in the stables there, and that's me. I was a Texas heavyweight of TKI, and there was Grandmaster Phil Wildman back in the day in my corner, and we battled to assure ourselves positioning. That was just the way it worked. Fighting in these kinds of full contact competitions has always been the way that schools who win the heavyweights or some great championship kind of rule. And Texas had me, and there was Mark the Kaiser and a few others out there in those days that stood into the ranks to fight for heavyweight titles. And this was early 80s to 2004. Before that, you had a different breed of champions that were fighting for heavyweight titles, bare knuckle, brawling tournaments, if you will, without the sport-like boxing skills that have moved and amped up the way people look at the sport of martial arts, if you will. It's not a sport to me, it's a way of life. And it is with people like, Grandmaster Rudy Smedley, who was in the rings out there, front row watching with his lovely wife, and many others, casters. And Keith Yates himself was out in that arena out there and watching this fight. I can't even begin to tell you. I think Grandmaster Steve Selby and many others were around this ring at this point, watching this particular event take place. That's how Phil Waters back then, Walt Mason back then was the Texas champions. And it was recognized that the controlling fighter, the one who was the champion, was the controlling school. And of course, it was kind of political, and it's always been political. But even back in those days, when the great fighters and champions that were bringing this to us did not know that we were going to become so technically experienced and moving beyond what they imagined. In those eras, you had great Alan Steen and all the champions before us, but now we're looking at WKA heavyweight title fights that were set up to organize better karateka, better kickboxing. Huge crowds and great support began to fall into place for kickboxing events such as these. This fighter is under Tony Lopez's stable, great karate. Heavyweights challenged the schools and the titles and who was the best, and that's the competition. That's what tournaments were all about. That's the challenge. Who's the best? That's from Chin Sukot Kwan and Hungar Kung Fu, fencing, judo, wrestling. All the things that I achieved in my young life to become a Texas heavyweight champion. And Those things were not. Just pay attention to those big hammers that ham bone's about to throw down on your head at 325 pounds. Because these guys, street brawlers like this, will knock your head clean off with those big ham bones. I promise you, I've been enough Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arkansas, Louisiana fist fights to know when a pit bull's about to take a bite out of me. So that's what you need to pay attention to first. Thank you very much. It was true that the full contact schools were really trying to open the doors to more people. So the more titles you had in the heavyweight, super heavyweight, middleweight, cruiserweight, those titles meant something for the schools. So a lot of times as a heavyweight, you had this feeling that you had to press on for the schools to represent that we were the best, etc. And so a lot of people would come out and challenge and every type, and you can get your head knocked clean off in these events. So yeah, it was a good challenge and something that built upon our schools' challenges and tournaments and ceremonies that enlisted what the styles were that were the best in knockout potentials, period. That's it. Potentials was also about the self-defense. I mean, self-defense was huge. It's growing up in the country, and there was a lot of money involved. I didn't go for the money thing. I just simply was one of the foot soldiers that would stay in there and fight, and I loved to fight. I was a pugilist. It really built upon my abilities to defend my family, my schools, my system, and even today at 62, I feel very competent and confident in what I'm able to do to defend my family, my school, and my styles. It's good for you. And coaches and students for life. This is the way of it. But the only way you can test yourself truly is to full contact it and just get in the ring and see who's going to knock who out. And I just became very good at it through a lot of help. Through a lot of help from, of course, God and God first, and then a lot of people that helped me accomplish those tasks that were needed to be done in a healthy club experience. So that's it. Anyway, we're my brother and family and everyone around. Does anyone else notice that? I did notice that he looked in the corner, and it's a sign for help. And I think I may have looked in my corner, before. At some point, so there's no shame in that. You're looking sometimes for advice. Who knows? He completely drops his guard and leaves himself wide open. He's exhausted, I think, and he's had enough. But he keeps going. Tough guy, I'm telling you. I'm just being sloppy with my guard and taking control of the fight my own way, basically. And I know it's over. Grandmaster Roy Kerbin, I think he knows definitely the guy should probably take a seat for a while, and that's the end of that, as you would call it, experience for us. There's Walt Mason there taking care of business, and again, Grandmaster Roy Kerbin lifting the hand, which is really the big honor in that particular super heavyweight fight. We didn't really expect super heavyweight titles back in those days. They were tough to come by. You were jumping in weight, you'd go from super heavyweight. Here I was cruiserweight, fighting Gary Ramsey,
Grandmaster Billy Jack Jackson, who's reffing the fight.
Armory. In the National Guard and all those guys. We were filming actually off of a tank. And this is, of course, just a short piece of that particular fight. But he took a lot of punishment. And a guy, I was, of course, again, switching a lot of weights. So I'd beef up and then I'd trim down. And each time it seems like I would gain more strength and flexibility trimming down in the cruiserweight and light heavyweight divisions. And of course, that's Grandmaster Billy Jack Jackson in that fight. And of course, here's Grandmaster Phil Wyman in this fight with Scott Phillips. A very, this was a very tough guy here.
Scott Cowboy Phillips.
Scott
and of course,
Phillips.
I'm getting a warning.
Cowboy
but
Phillips
the, Texas
out of the
Heavyweight
Larry Wheeler,
Championships
Grandmaster
again,
Larry Wheeler,
were with
highly
WKA
respected
and,
friend of
the
mine
challenge was on.
and teacher. Also, we worked together for a little bit. It allowed me in his gym and raised some students there. But he brought in this guy, Cowboy Scott Phillips, in there to take out the old Chickasaw Indian. And he was tough. He could push. He knew how to try to take control of the ring. He just was just a great fighter. Just didn't have the kicks he needed to pass 3 rounds or 5 rounds or 10 rounds. Just a good fighter. Anyway, Grandmaster Phil Wyman used to really work us over and train us back in those days. I think the 80s, early 80s, we were bringing on, we were filling up arenas, in the early 80s. And we were doing it by our skills and our abilities that we attained from the grandfathers and fathers and pioneers of our style. And our style, which was, a lot of people called it karate or taekwondo. I think the best way to figure that one out is through Keith Yates, our grandmaster, who really is the historian of what's really happening in the past and in today's time. I follow Grandmaster Yates with huge respect, learning what I can from him. And same as with these great fighters. If you don't fight, you certainly aren't a fighter.
Best fight nationally. And this is New Mexico Heavyweight Championships, WKA. Another championship, and the school is promoted that way. This is Arkansas Heavyweight Champion, and the undisputed heavyweight champion Troy Dorsey is refereeing the fight. And there's Walt Mason, and he gets up after a long timeout.
My brother's a badass. 1967, went through military academies, boys' ranches, all kinds of street challenges, nosebleed.
Well, you're going in, he was tough. He put up a good fight. Yeah, he couldn't fight. Ray Barnes, no slouch. Your first thoughts in that first round when you were filling each other out?
He came out. I wanted to get some work in and be relaxed. He kicks pretty well. He's got good flexibility. He has some oomph behind his kick.
What were you thinking about going into that second round? Because you had him down. That was the big round where you got him down. You dropped him with an uppercut.
Yeah, he hit him with a good uppercut. Hurt my hip. Actually, maybe the boxing match did not stop that. He was kind of out, but unfortunately they didn't. But yeah, he was hurt. I knew I was going to take him this next round because I took a lot of wind out of him. There was some good body shots, and one thing that dropped him there when he got him the second time. I went through his body and out his back.
1991, Blaisdell Arena. Great memories.
Thank you for watching Nosebleed Cinema. Thanks.